Today we're going to look at a foundational concept of harmony called secondary dominance. This, along with my last lesson on borrowed minor harmony, will give you a pretty solid foundation for creating and analyzing chord progressions. And just like we did in the last lesson, we're going to systematically go through all the secondary dominant chord options we have within a key. This will give you a pretty comprehensive guide for understanding this concept. Let's get into it. So first up, to understand what a secondary dominant chord is, we have to review our basic diatonic harmony. Now today we're in the key of C major, and our chords that live within this key are C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, F dominant 7, A minor 7, B minor 7 flat 5, and then back to C major 7. So the only dominant 7 chord we have in the key is G7. This is called our primary dominant chord because it's the one found naturally within the key. And this is a significant chord because this G7 has a strong pull back to the tonic. This tritone interval found within the chord from the major 3rd and flat 7 naturally wants to resolve back to the root and 3rd of C major. So we can take the sound of this dominant 5 chord and this tension found within that tritone interval that wants to resolve, and we can use this to resolve to other chords in our diatonic family. Let's walk through them. So G7 is the 5 chord of C major, and that means A7 is the 5 chord of our D minor 7. And this concept of secondary dominance works equally well whether we're resolving to a major chord or a minor chord. So we have A7 going to D minor, and then continuing our way up, we have B7 going to E minor, then we have C7 going to our F major, then we have D7 going to our G, and then we have E7 going to our A minor, and then the last one we don't really use so much because we're going to this B minor 7 flat 5 chord, which isn't really a chord you're necessarily going to resolve to, but it would be, F sharp 7 going to B minor 7 flat 5. So I like to write all these secondary dominants out on a sheet of paper so I can see them laid out in front of me. This way, when you're writing a chord progression and you're looking for different chord options to use, you have everything visually laid out in front of you. Now, the chord progression I use a lot of times when I'm teaching this concept is a simple C major diatonic chord progression going from C major to A minor to F major to G major. And what I like to do is use that as a vehicle to hear the sounds of these different secondary dominant chords. So what we're going to do is insert a secondary dominant chord in between each chord in the progression to build tension and resolve to the different chords of the progression. So when you have it visually laid out like this, it's easy to see. If you're going from C major to A minor, we're going to insert the secondary dominant of A minor to get there. So it's going to go C to E7 and then to A minor. And then from A minor to get to F, we're going to use the secondary dominant of F, which is C7. And then to get to G, we're going to use the secondary dominant of G, which is D7, to get to the G7 chord. So now that we've kind of discussed that, let's hear what it sounds like. So going from C major to A minor, we can insert that secondary dominant of E7 in between those two chords. So now we have C major, E7 to A minor. And then going from A minor to F, we can insert the C7. So A minor, C7 to F. And you hear how that creates a little bit of tension that then resolves really nicely when we get to the F chord. And then going from F to G, we can put in that D7. So F to D7 to G. So now we've taken this simple little chord progression of C major, A minor, F major, to G, and we've transformed it into this new progression full of secondary dominant chords. Alright, so in my last video I talked about borrowed minor harmony. If you haven't checked that lesson out, go watch that video. But similarly, I wrote out all the chords to the parallel minor key, C minor, along with our C major diatonic family of chords. So now I'm going to add that to our secondary dominant list. So here's our diatonic family of chords. Here's our secondary dominants. The 5 chords of each one of those chords. And then here is our diatonic family of chords for E flat major, which is the relative major key of C minor. So all this together gives you a pretty complete visual guide of a bunch of different chord options you can use for writing chord progressions in the key of C. So I've got a chord progression that I wrote that uses a bunch of this borrowed minor harmony and some secondary dominant chords. And I'm going to play it down, and I'm going to put the chord names up on the screen along with designations as to what types of chords they are, whether they're borrowed chords or secondary dominants. This will give you an opportunity to kind of hear what this stuff sounds like in the context of a song. Alright, so you may be wondering how I solo over a chord progression like this, and the easiest answer I can give you, in my opinion, is to use arpeggios and chord tones. So many of the chords are not diatonic to C major, so the simplest and most precise way to solo over these chords is to use chord tones. The roots, the thirds, the fifths, the sevenths, the notes that are found within the chords. So I'm going to leave you with a simple little solo. I'm going to play a couple times through the chord progression, and I'm going to play some simple melodies that just connect together chord tones over the different changes. And this is all going to be tabbed out and notated over on my Patreon page, so look at the links in the description for that. That's a great way to support the channel. But until next time, happy practicing and take care.